Hello everyone, this is Tony from Two Copper Pieces. I'm the one without the beard. You've got a little shot of me there. Please don't track me down. Or you can come, if you ever see me, you can come and say hello, I suppose. So, in this video, I'm going to be showing you a few different ways to paint weapons. So this is kind of aimed at NMM sort of style of weapon, which I find tends to look better. NMM stands for non-metallic metal. So you're trying to paint something up to look like it's metallic without actually using metallic paint. I'll also show you an easy way, as you can see here, to paint up with metallic metal and to get it to stand out quite well. And then you can kind of judge for yourself about which sort of style you might like to use. I'm also trying to show you quick ways to do this, quick and easy. So stick around after the credits and we'll go through it. And we're back. So this is a piece from HeroQuest, a weapons rack, as you can see. So I thought this would be a really good object to showcase a few different styles. I've sped up the footage here because all I'm doing is painting the weapons white, so they'll stand out a bit more. I'm not even giving full coverage of white because they already have quite a light coat of sort of a grey dry brush. But when I was painting up the wood, I got some of that brown ink on some of the weapons, and I want to make sure I'm covering that up so they are basically a blank canvas to show you how to paint. White is it's a good base coat for this sort of thing, I think, especially for metallics if you're going to use a lot of different colours on there. Now this is the first recipe, I guess. I'm using speed paints because they run really nicely, and 3 shades of grey. I know it said Holy White, but it's really a very light grey. And I'll also be using some white mixed with some speed paint medium to add on later. Just adding those colours to the palette there. I put them on the palette thinking maybe I'll mix them at some point, but I don't think I'll be doing that after all. I don't think it's necessary. It's always a good idea to look at a reference. As you can see here, you can see some darker areas and some lighter areas where the light catches metal in different places. Really the key to NMM, or non-metallic metal painting, is getting the lighter areas light and the darker areas dark. That's true of everything really, but it's not as simple as painting the recesses dark and the high points light. You have to look at the reflections and things like that. So I'm using it as a reference for this sword here. I'm just adding in the dark parts around the edges near the hilt. And oftentimes you'll see with swords, because they're a bit angular and they have a bit of they reach a bit of a triangular shape in the middle, you'll have one half of the sword looking a lot darker and another half of the sword looking a lot lighter. So just think about what side the light is coming from, and the side the light is coming from will be lighter, it'll be very bright white, and the side that's slightly protected from the light will get more of that shade. I personally find speed paints really helpful for this. It speeds things up a lot. You see it's starting to come in, and it's starting to take form already, as you can see. There are a couple of darker reflections in the reference that I'm trying to add in and replicate here with my darkest shade of grey. This Gravelord Grey from Army Painter is dark enough that if you've got it pooled and concentrated, it will be as good as black in some places. And I find that really helps with non-metallic metal painting, because in some places you want to be able to fan it out a bit, and other places you want to have it really concentrated and pooled. So this gives you a lot of control there. Taking a slightly different approach with this video and my next video. Had some feedback that my previous videos were just making everything a bit too fast. I think I was very much of the opinion that you you kind of want fast and punchy videos, and I want to show a lot in a short time, but I'm just trying out this approach instead. It may mean there are some long stretches of silences. And this looks really fiddly and finicky, and it is definitely more fiddly than just covering something in a metallic paint, but the result I think you'll see is a lot better, and it doesn't take that long. Like I've seen people do NMM videos or paint something in NMM style, and it'll take them up to an hour just on the blade of a sword, and if you're going to spend that time, you probably will get a much more sophisticated result if you know what you're doing with it. But this is a sort of quick and cheerful way of doing it, not worrying about realism too much, not worrying about every little reflection, just giving that effect, and I think it works out pretty well. So here I'm adding some highlights with a bit of a glaze of white paint mixed with speed paint medium from Army Painter, which I think is just the same as any painting medium, just to thin it down. Maybe there's a difference, I don't really know. I found it a bit too concentrated, even mixed with the medium, so I've wet my brush quite heavily and gone back to get a bit more. And now I can sort of really add, if I'm a bit liberal with it, it's not going to be too harsh a contrast. I find it easier to add light amounts, light glazes, and I can build up those layers. That will be more effective than accidentally doing too much and trying to fix that afterwards. So that's what I tend to aim for. You don't want to overdo it in the first pass. Now usually when I'm using speed paints and painting minis, not just the weapons, I want to get the base coat down and not worry too much about doing lots of layers. I don't really like doing lots of coats. I know people say, oh, at least 2 coats, maybe 3 coats, etc., but it's just not for me. I don't have the time for it, and by the time I don't have the interest in it, it's not very fun. I like getting lots of minis painted to a reasonable standard pretty quickly, so just kind of slapping it on to start with and then spending more time on highlights and things like that to bring them out. I find that a lot more enjoyable. But having said that, paint the way you want to paint, of course. Don't have to listen to me, but then you are watching the video, so I will give you my perspective on it. And also, having said that, what I've enjoyed about painting minis has kind of changed over time. There was a point where I didn't even think it mattered to kind of wash them, and I would just get them all based in one colour and then dunk them in some Army Painter quick shade, and I thought, well, this looks fine, this will do, and it was okay. They were okay. Definitely tabletop ready. I think what people talk about as tabletop ready has changed since I've started painting minis. Now tabletop ready is pretty high standard in most people's estimation, really. Right, so here I'm doing this. I'm using the same recipe on this spear, halberd, whatever it's called. I've tried a slightly different approach, and I've watered down the black and just sort of splodged it on as best I can. I think I made it a bit too runny, and it all just kind of started running off. But that could be a kind of a quick way of doing NMM. If you've got a wash, like a dark wash, and you just kind of smear it on and let it pool where it wants to pool. Sometimes not in the cracks, sometimes it will just pool on the surface. That can actually add to your NMM. It could be a good starting point for your NMM style, because often with non-metallic metal there are just areas that just don't pick up the light for no apparent reason, and if you let your wash pool in a slightly splotchy way, it kind of achieves that effect once it's all dry. And then you can just do a little bit of tidying up with some lighter glazes or lighter line work afterwards to make it a bit more defined. But I've tried to paint each one in a slightly different style to give you a bit of a choice and a bit of an idea of different approaches. I'm pretty happy with that sword there. I think the sword looks much better than the halberd, but there you go. So now this is using metallics. This is a brass from Game Color, I think, Vallejo that is. Easy way to do it, just slap it all over the desired area, completely covered, even in the cracks and the recesses. This is the first step if you're using metallics, I would say. Second step would be to add a black wash. I'm not going to change paints for it. I'm just going to use that Gravelord Grey with a slightly wetter brush than I would usually. Once this is dry, I'll just coat those what they're called maces, and the mace and the Morning Star, I think that's what they're called, with the wash, and let the blackness sort of pull in the cracks and lines and give it a bit of definition. Oop, don't drop it. Those are weapons, be careful. Here I am just adding a black wash after leaving it to dry for a little while. If you want to speed things along, you can always use a hairdryer or a heat gun to get it to dry a lot quicker, but So perfectly fine, serviceable result that you'll see at the end, I suppose. Now I'm using a different colour, which I've had some success with before. So I'm using Sand Golem, which I find to be quite a good analogue for a sort of a gold colour. And I'm going to paint that sword up with this Sand Golem paint, and then I've added yellow for a highlight. I don't think I even ended up using it, because what I found previously is with this speed paint, if I do one coat, one fairly even coat, and then I can go back with another dip of the tip and just add to certain areas, like add to the recesses, add to an edge, just one edge, not both edges. It will give a bit of a metallic effect, a bit of a metallic shine to it. Here I'm just trying to get the coat even, but then I'm trying to, as some of the paint is still wet and speed paint's very watery, I'm just trying to carefully kind of tease the water along the edge. Backside. I left out a lot of the footage of the backside because just, didn't think it looked great. Also, it's a bit dodgy to be getting footage of backsides all the time. Right. So here I'm trying to add some extra pools of colour under the beams there, because that will add a bit of shadow, and then also along one edge. I didn't really think about where the light was coming from. It should have, because it was the other side, it should have been the opposite. It should have been a sort of reflection or opposite to the front side. But yeah, now I'm trying to add a bit more along one edge. It's not really working very well. I think I should have waited for the initial coat to dry a bit more, because it's kind of spreading and seeping in different areas, not quite how I'd like it. If it were dry, if the initial coat were dry, it would probably pool where I wanted it to a lot more easily. It's not really playing ball here, but I'm just trying to get a thicker pool of paint along one edge and leaving the other edge lighter, and we'll add a bit of a highlight to that edge later to make that stand out. You're just trying to wipe it on that one edge to try and get it to stay there, but it's just not happening very effectively here at the moment. Now, the axe, we'll come back to that sword later with some highlights, but the axe, I'm going to try and use some different colours, a bit of blue to make it pop or stand out a little bit better, make it look a little bit more interesting. Maybe it makes the axe look like a bit more of a special weapon. I'm still going to be using some greys in there. In this case, I've got the brush quite wet, and I'm just laying down some wet speed paint on different portions of the axe, and then some white glaze as well, very wet, different portions. Going to clean the brush now, and then going to use the slightly wet brush to just push those pools of paint together and let them run into each other a little bit. It's very quick, sort of wet, blendy speed paint, and then I'm going to use the brush to kind of tease it around. Once that's dry, I'll add in some white highlights to make it stand out a bit better. Here it lost some of that saturation of darkness there, so adding a bit more here, just at the, whatever that bit is called, not the hilt, the bit that attaches to the handle, I think is the technical term. And then I'm using that brush to kind of smear some of that white into the blue a bit more. Trying to get the edges highlighted, and there I'm just trying to suck up some of the blue into the bristles. There's a bit too much, a bit oversaturated, or maybe not oversaturated, just a bit overpooled rather than oversaturated. I'll go back and add a bit more white there because I want it to blend nicely and cover up, get the edges in there. And then I think I went back and added a bit more blue after that, but no, I think that was it. There we go. So just wait for that to dry. Oh no, not wait for it. I did go back and add some blue. There we go. Right, added a tiny bit of blue there. Now it's dry. While I'm waiting for it to dry, I'm doing the edge of the sword to try and make those edges stand out and pop a bit more. Now, I think it's okay. It's an okay result, but it didn't work as well as I'd like it to. I think I wanted the edge to look a lot darker, but some of the central parts are darker. I think it's okay. Not the best attempt, but it's okay. I keep saying it's okay. If I keep telling myself it's okay, you know, it's gonna be okay, isn't it? Yeah, so going adding a few more lighter edges there. A bit of contrast is what really makes your NMM style weapons pop a bit more. These edges aren't really thin enough for the halberd. I didn't enjoy painting that halberd, I'll tell you that much. Worked on the sword though. Great job there. Good job, Tony, from 2 Copper Pieces without the beard. It's nice. Then finally adding some lines and edges to the axe. Just getting them in using just the tip, just the edge of the paintbrush and the bristles. Getting that edge highlighted, a line, a couple of lines that add a bit of shine. Yeah, that looks good. Just dab it with a finger to take up some of the paint a little bit, make it stand out a bit more bright in some places. Nice work. Alright, so there's a few different styles of NMM weapons that you go for. For me, I think the blue one is the best, closely followed by the sword that I did at the beginning. I'm no longer really a big fan of just slapping on some metallic paint and highlighting it, or not highlighting it, drenching it in some wash, but it certainly does the trick, and there's nothing wrong with it. I just want to make them a bit more interesting. So I hope you enjoyed the video. If you like, subscribe, leave a comment, let me know which one you prefer, and I'll see you next time. Thanks very much.